Have you ever heard a story so strange, so chilling, that it stays with you long after you've heard it? A story with a mystery so deep it has baffled historians and treasure hunters for over 400 years. Today, we're re-diving into one of America's oldest and most haunting cold cases, the Lost Colony of Roanoke, Inc. It all begins in the late 16th century, a time of great ambition and exploration. Queen Elizabeth I of England wanted to establish a foothold in the New World, to rival the Spanish Empire. Her trusted courtier, Sir Walter Raleigh, was granted the charter to colonize North America. After a preliminary scouting mission in 1584 that reported a land of abundance, the first real attempt at settlement began in 1585. This initial colony, a military focus group of about 100 men, was established on the northern end of Roanoke Island in what is now North Carolina. But from the very beginning, things went wrong. The men were soldiers, not farmers. They struggled to grow their own food and quickly became dependent on the local Native American tribes, like the Croatoan and Croatoan peoples. At first, relations were tense but manageable. However, as the Englishmen's demands for food grew, so did the friction. The English commander Ralph Lane was known for his aggressive tactics. A dispute over a silver cup led him to attack a native village, a violent act that shattered any chance of peaceful coexistence. By the time Sir Francis Drake arrived with a supply fleet in 1586, the colonists were desperate to leave. They abandoned the settlement and sailed back to England, missing a relief ship sent by Raleigh by only a few weeks. This first failure didn't deter Raleigh. He was determined to succeed, so in 1587, he organized a second expedition. This time, it would be different. Instead of soldiers, he sent families, men, women, and children. Over 115 colonists, led by a man named John White, set sail for a new life. Their destination was supposed to be the Chesapeake Bay, a more favorable location further north. But for reasons that are still debated, the ship's pilot, Simon Fernandez, refused to sail beyond Roanoke Island. He forced the colonists to disembark at the site of the failed 1585 settlement. Once again, they were in the wrong place, with their plans disrupted. They tried to make the best of it, repairing the dilapidated fort and houses left behind by the first group. John White attempted to re-establish friendly relations with the local tribes, but the memory of Ralph Lane's violence was still fresh. Only the Croatoan tribe, who lived on a nearby island, were willing to engage with them. Then, just a few weeks after their arrival, tragedy struck. One of the colonists, George Howe, was found dead, riddled with arrows while he was crabbing alone. Fear gripped the small community. They realized they were isolated and vulnerable, with dwindling supplies and hostile neighbors. They pleaded with John White to return to England to gather reinforcements and more provisions. White was hesitant. He didn't want to leave his family, including his daughter Eleanor Dare and his newborn granddaughter, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas. But the colony's survival depended on it. He reluctantly agreed and set sail in late August 1587, promising to return as quickly as possible. Before he left, they agreed on a contingency plan. If the colonists had to move for any reason, they would carve their new location into a tree. If they were in distress, they would carve a Maltese cross above the name. With that understanding, John White departed, leaving his family and over 100 other souls behind, trusting he would see them again soon. He could never have imagined it would be 3 long years before he returned. White's journey back to England was a nightmare of bad timing. When he arrived, he found England on the brink of war with Spain. The mighty Spanish Armada was preparing to attack, and Queen Elizabeth I had commanded that all available ships be used for the defense of the realm.
Oh, no.
But his efforts were repeatedly thwarted. He was trapped, watching helplessly from across the Atlantic as precious time slipped away. Finally, in 1590, 3 years after he had left, White managed to secure passage on a privateering expedition. It wasn't a direct supply mission, but it was his only chance. After a summer spent raiding Spanish ships in the Caribbean, the fleet finally arrived at Roanoke Island on a stormy August evening. It was his granddaughter Virginia's 3rd birthday. As they approached the island, White's heart must have been pounding. He saw a plume of smoke rising from the woods and his hopes soared. The colonists were still there. They anchored and sounded a trumpet, playing familiar English tunes, expecting a joyful reply. But the only answer was a haunting silence, broken only by the crashing waves and the cries of the seabirds. The next morning, White and his men went ashore. What they found was not a thriving settlement, but an eerie, deserted village. The houses had been dismantled, not burned or destroyed, but carefully taken down. The entire area was overgrown with weeds, as if it had been abandoned for some time. There were no signs of a struggle, no bodies, no skeletons. It was as if the 117 men, women, and children had simply vanished into thin air. Then he saw it. Carved into a post of the defensive palisade that the colonists had built was a single word: Croatoan. White remembered their plan. This was the message. They had moved to Croatoan Island, where their friendly native allies lived. Searched for the distress signal, the Maltese cross. It was nowhere to be found. This, to him, was a good sign. It meant they had left voluntarily and safely. Nearby, on another tree, he found the letters Crow carved into the bark. His relief was immense. He knew where to find them. They had to get to Croatoan Island, about 50 miles south. But the weather had other ideas. A massive storm was brewing, and the ship's captain, already impatient after the long voyage, refused to risk his vessel and crew. Their anchor cable snapped, and they were nearly driven onto the shore. The captain declared it was too dangerous to stay. He turned the ship around and headed for the open sea, promising to try again later, but they never did. John White was forced back to England, heartbroken. He would never see his family again. He died a few years later, never knowing for sure what happened to his daughter, his granddaughter, and the Lost Colony of Roanoke. So, what does Croatoan mean? For centuries, this has been the central clue in a relentless historical puzzle. The most straightforward theory is that the colonists did exactly what the message implied. They moved to Croatoan Island, which is now called Hatteras Island, to live with the friendly Croatoan people. Evidence from the time supports this. English explorer John Lawson wrote in the early 1700s that he met natives on Hatteras Island who claimed their ancestors were white people and could talk in a book. Some even had gray eyes, a feature uncommon among Native Americans, but common in Europeans. Could these have been the descendants of the Roanoke colonists, assimilated into the tribe over generations? It seems plausible. They were running low on supplies, and integrating with a local group that knew how to survive in the environment would have been a logical choice. However, if that's the case, why was a permanent connection never reestablished? Why did they seem to disappear from the historical record? This leads to other, darker theories. One theory suggests the colonists attempted to sail back to England on their own. They had a small ship, a pinnace, left with them. Perhaps in their desperation, they tried to make the treacherous journey across the Atlantic and were lost at sea. This would explain the lack of any trace on land, but it seems unlikely for a group containing women and children with limited sailing experience. Another grim possibility is that they were attacked and wiped out. Perhaps by the Spanish, who saw the English colony as a threat to their claims in the New World. A Spanish patrol did search for the Roanoke colony around 1600, but they found no trace of it. It's also possible they were attacked by one of the less friendly local tribes as punishment for the aggression of the first colony. The dismantled houses could suggest the natives salvaged the materials, but the lack of bodies or signs of a battle makes this theory less convincing. Then there are the more speculative ideas. Some have suggested the colony split up. Perhaps some went to Croatoan while another group moved inland, up the Chowan River. In the early days of the Jamestown settlement, founded in 1607, Captain John Smith heard tales from Chief Powhatan about people living to the south who dressed and lived like Englishmen. Powhatan claimed to have attacked them, but some may have escaped. Archaeological finds like a 16th century English signet ring found at a native site inland lend some credence to this idea. For centuries, the mystery remained locked in speculation. But in recent years, modern archaeology has opened new doors. The Dare Stones, a series of inscribed rocks discovered in the 1930s that supposedly told the story of the colonists' fate, were largely proven to be a hoax. However, more promising evidence has emerged. Using ground-penetrating radar and analysis of old maps, archaeologists have identified two potential settlement sites. One, called Site X, is located about 50 miles inland from Roanoke Island. Excavations there have uncovered fragments of English pottery from the right time period, mixed in with native artifacts. This suggests a small group of colonists may have lived there, integrating with a local tribe. Another site on Hatteras Island, ancient Croatoan, has also yielded English trade goods and personal items from the 1580s. So, what really happened to the Lost Colony of Roanoke? The most likely answer isn't a single dramatic event, but a story of survival and adaptation. It's probable that the colonists, facing starvation, split into smaller groups. Some went to live with the Croatoan on Hatteras Island, eventually assimilating into their community. Others may have ventured inland, seeking refuge with different native groups. Over the years, through intermarriage and cultural absorption, their English identity faded, leaving behind only faint echo stories of ancestors who came from across the sea, strange artifacts buried in the soil, and a single cryptic word carved into a tree. The mystery of Roanoke isn't about a colony that was lost, but about a group of people who transformed. They didn't just vanish. Their story simply became part of a new story, woven into the fabric of the people and the land of the New World. It's a haunting reminder of the fragility of life, the clash of cultures, and the enduring power of a mystery that continues to capture our imagination over 400 years later. What do you think happened? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this journey into one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into the unknown. We'll see you in the next video.